listening to the Hometown Losers, the St. Louis Sports Podcast, with Josh, Adam, and OJ.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back here to the Hometown Losers Podcast. This is session number 41, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host and OJ and Adam, excuse me. Gentlemen, how are we doing now in episode 2 of season 2? Tom.
Dos.
Excellent.
Yeah. Excellent.
Doing
great.
I could never roll my R's.
Great.
Which is so it. And OJ, and let's talk about that just for a split second. With your mom being a Spanish teacher for years and years and years, how does she not teach you how to roll the R's the correct way, right?
I think it's just like something you do. It's like,
you're
like,
born with it. 100% is.
Like you can't teach somebody to roll their tongue. You know what I mean? Like it's a genetic thing almost. Like.
You are 100% right, because I had some issues with French too, and it's like, you know, croissant, and so I like go
croissant.
Like instead of roll my tongue, and like just to have the dialect right, it still sounds like crap. Croissant. You know, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be sure to emphasize my R's throughout the entire episode.
Like in South Park, with the fireworks.
Yeah. I misinterpreted the rules. Anyways.
No, spectacular.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, guys, let's jump into it here. Let's talk about some Blues. So, quick update. They are now 13-11-1 for 27 points. So, since last week when we talked, they have gone 2-2. Wait, no, right? Is that correct or am I wrong? They have gone 2-2. Yeah. They are now fifth in the. Go ahead, Adam.
Well, I was going to say because they beat Vegas and then they lost to Vegas. I think that they ended up. Yeah, it's all good. But yeah, you were saying the standings currently we're at 50th, I think, right?
Yes. So we're in 5th in the Central. We're 7 points behind the Avs. We were last week when we talked, we were 4th, but the Yotes have moved in front of us. We are now in the second wild card spot and 1 point behind those Yotes that I talked about who are in the first wild card spot. We are in 8th in the West now, and I believe before we were in the 7th, so not really that drop far behind. Again, Yotes moving up. We're still we are now 12 points behind Vegas instead of the 3, even though we won against them. And we are now 17th in the NHL instead of 15th, which we had, and we're still 12 points behind Vegas, who is the number 1 team right now currently in the NHL. So it's been that same thing that we've been talking about pretty much all season long for the Blues. It feels like they're slightly above 500, but in reality, you look at 13-11 and 1 overtime loss is really 13-12, right? You just get the extra point, so it's kind of a 500 team. Yeah. So, you know, before I get into like the really only topic I have for the Blues, OJ, yeah, exactly, 1 game above 500. OJ, you're correctly right. So before I get into like the one subject I really wanted to talk about with the Blues here. OJ, what was your thoughts of the Blues this past week? Did you see something that like is the kind of same feeling for you, or are you kind of feeling like, okay, this could be a turning point? You know, what's your kind of opinion looking at it?
Well, honestly, like the main things that have jumped out to me so far, like basically I've liked Jordan Kyrou continuing to play a good game. Like he seems like he's all over the ice most nights. So like he's doing what he needs to do. He had a filthy goal last night, which I went back and watched after you texted me, OJ.
It was ridiculous. Yeah, that was A class.
Yeah. And then there's Jake Neighbors, who's like now the leading goal scorer on the team because, you know, we all called that at the beginning of the season.
Right.
So you've got this big dude that's super young still. He's like, 21, 22? Something like that. So big guy, very young, plays center, plays a good all-around game, and now he's like putting the puck in the back of the net like a legitimate goal scorer. Like it's kind of like a Tage Thompson kind of development, you know? Obviously it hasn't continued on, but it's that kind of thing where you have this guy you thought might be good. He's kind of like big, like Tage Thompson too. Like, yeah, I don't know. Pretty, those are very encouraging signs to me.
Interesting tidbit, just in case if no one knew, there's only 2 players under the age of 22 currently leading their teams in goals. Let me take a guess. Number 1, Connor Bedard, and number 2 is Jake Neighbors.
Jesus.
There you go.
There you go. Interesting tidbit.
See, we didn't even fucking need that shit.
Connor who?
Chicago needs the NHL giving them all the help they can get, dude. We just fucking do it. Fuck Chicago.
Yeah,
there you go. We're bringing it back.
Fuck Chicago, indeed. Anyways, Adam, what was your thoughts so far on since last week? Have you seen improvements in a certain area? Are you kind of concerned about a certain aspect of the game? What was your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's, once again, it's the consistency factor for me, for sure. They're performing, actually, I'll say as a whole, I think they're above my expectations overall in this season. I guess because I was not expecting to hit, be playing 500 at this point at this time, just with what we saw last year. But I think overall they are exceeding those expectations. They are, actually working more cohesively as a team. And we are starting to see, to OJ's point, those younger players like Jake Neighbors that are, coming out and shining right now, which is great to see, that our future might be a little bit bright. So, but the consistency is key for sure. And that's something I think we have to continue to work on going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of the next step, I guess. I don't want to forget to mention, I should say Colton Parayko's been amazing this year. So, that's something I can't stop saying. Jordan Binnington's been great. Of course, that goes hand in hand with the overall defensive game becoming much better than last season. I think it's kind of starting to come together a little bit. They definitely have the ingredients there. I think maybe they're missing something still. But you can kind of see them play more fluidly and more smoothly and stuff. They've looked good in these last 2 games against Vegas, the best team in the country, supposedly. Right. They've looked good. Yeah. I mean, part of the reason they lost last night, they did have, they shot themselves in the foot with penalties. You could argue the refs maybe hosed them a little bit too later in the game, but, They also looked like a way better team than Vegas throughout the first period. That's when Jordan Kyrou had his filthy goal. Jake Neighbors walked one in too. It wasn't as filthy as Kyrou's, but it was it's like if you're playing NHL on a really low difficulty and you just don't respect the defender's ability at all, and you're like, I'm just gonna skate right up past you and then just put it in the back of the net. That was how it was. A high confidence play. I really liked seeing it from him.
Yeah, really. Last night's game, there's I think 8 penalties I'm counting here, and that really turned into 2 goals, really. So honestly, the Blues really should have probably won that game with ease, really. But there was a lot of penalties.
They need to cut down on the penalties.
Yeah,
they need to cut down on the penalties. I know there was a pretty blatant too many men by Vegas that didn't get called right after they had called one on us. It's one of those kind of games where it's kind of feels like the NHL is trying to tilt it one way, maybe a little bit, But no, overall, I really like where they are compared to where I thought they would be. When I watch them now, I see a hockey team that's fun to watch, and they look like they have the potential to be pretty good.
Definitely.
So, and I think, OJ, what it reminds me of watching them, it reminds me of the early days. I think they're a little bit better, or really kind of on the same part, but the early days of when we drafted TJ Oshie and David Backes and David Perron, not necessarily to the hype level of that, or does it feel like we have that deep of young talent, the depth isn't there? That's what it feels like, the hopeful optimism that you have when you watch a team going, okay, you know what? If they lose, we were expected to lose probably, but they're winning some games. Okay, cool. I feel good about that. You look at the 500, go, well, they're actually they're keeping up with some of the teams. Are they going to win the West? No, they're not going to win West, but they might be able to sneak into the playoffs, right? So I think that, Adam, as you pointed out as well, too, the young guys stepping up, I think has really changed my dark cloud surrounding the Blues and has, kind of made it a little bit clearer for me and a little bit more hope, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely more, I feel a lot more encouraged. Like I was saying, it was above average whenever I was, going into the season. So,
Yeah.
they're exceeding my expectations. Like if I were to look at, like on my scale of, sports that I regularly watch, and especially local sports and whatnot, they would certainly be on my, on my scale of one to watch per se, because they are, they're performing better than I definitely expected.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, OJ, you brought up something. I'm going to go back to that now, where it was, we're just kind of missing that something, right? So that comes to the question I had for you guys here, whether at the trade deadline, we're going to be buyers or sellers, right? Now, the trade deadline is March 8th this year, so that's still 92 days away, but it is somewhat fast approaching, right? You only have 3 months essentially to figure out what is this team. Is this going to be a team that's going to contend in the West, or is this a team that could, get into that like last wild card spot and then flame out, or is this a team that's just going to end up kind of crashing down to earth? And I think that's kind of what everybody in the Blues organization is going to have to decide. But you hopefully have a plan going up to the trade deadline at least a month ahead of time. So you kind of have like now really that 92 days from the trade deadline is more around like 60 days to me, because, it might not be a clear picture what you want to do at the deadline, but I think you need to have that plan of action going into the month before it. Right. So, Adam, I'll start with you on this one. Do you believe the Blues are going to be buyers or sellers, at the deadline?
Well, I think it really depends, because you made a good point, whether we actually make the playoffs or we don't, right? So if we don't, I say we're definitely should be looking at, in my opinion, being sellers for sure.
Especially on some of these heavier contracts in the defense,
absolutely.
Maybe.
Perhaps if we actually do squeak in, depending on, I mean, Doug, obviously Armstrong is going to have to look at the value of what he can bring in, for some of these guys, and he may be able to hang on to a few of them, and it might be worth it if there's something that he feels is worth it at the end of the day. I think, Verana, for example, he was once a really promising scorer, but I think he's struggling this season, and he's definitely raising some speculation about a possible trade I've been seeing, and I know I'm looking here, Scandella, he is an expiring contract, and that could be a valuable option for, playoff contenders as well. There's a few others, obviously Torrey Krug, Justin Falk, both very high paid defensemen. We could definitely see their names in trade talks, especially, I think around those guys, I would say would be who I would be focusing on, especially if we're trying to offload some of these bigger contracts and we're not to the point where we can actually, land a playoff spot, in my opinion.
Right. And that's kind of somewhat what I felt as well. But before I kind of get to that, OJ, what's your opinion here? Do you believe the Blues will be sellers, or do you think they're going to be buying at the trade deadline?
So honestly, right now, I think neither. I mean, they could, maybe if they go on a run, they try and be buyers, but no, I don't think so. I don't think they're gonna sell any prospects. I think they're pretty committed to bringing their, anyone who they would trade from their prospect pool they're committed to bringing them up to the NHL, I think, at some point. So
right.
I really see more, even if they're like doing well, I could see like more of a hockey trade, like with Verana, like Adam was saying, because he kind of has been in Chiefs doghouse quite a lot of the year so far. And he kind of seems to be like that Mike Hoffman player that just is able to float and put the puck in the back of the net. And so like he would have value to a specific team, maybe a loaded
and he's
team.
a UFA next year anyway. So,
Exactly. So maybe you look for a team that's already pretty loaded and needs some finishing touch, especially if maybe somebody gets injured or something like that. You call them up, you see what you can get for them, and then you make the swap. Because I don't think he just hasn't shown that he's able to adapt to the style we need him to play. So that's one I could definitely see happening And then
when
yeah,
you're
I mean,
okay with parting with too, for the right
Yeah,
price.
exactly.
Especially
That's
the
what I'm
performances
saying.
here, for sure.
Right.
I wouldn't consider that really selling or buying. Just he's not really useful to us right now, and so if we can get some useful piece for him, that would be good. And then the other thing is if you could deal one of your aging, expensive defensemen, I assume you would, even though they've actually been pretty good as a unit this year. But yeah,
and that's
it may
whenever
not
I
be
start
bad.
looking at like Scandella, for example, because he is aging and he is coming up at the end of his contract as well.
Yeah. And Scandella definitely is one if you're gonna sell off for sure. So yeah, if they're running bad, maybe they would try and trade him. He probably would have, like I said, all these guys you could probably find some kind of trade partner for. You may have to retain some salary, but the way the unit's been playing this year, they probably have enough good-looking tape that maybe somebody would take a flyer on him. But I mean, that Krug contract is long, I think. Still,
Yeah,
so
it's killing.
All the way
it's
until
gonna
like
be
27 or 28, I think. So yeah.
yeah.
Right.
So I don't know. You're
It's
gonna
crushing.
find too many people thrilled for that, but I don't know. He said he wanted to be part of the solution here, so
Yeah.
I respect that. I respect his refusal to give up. And I mean, he has seemed to have elevated his game somewhat this year, even though he still makes some boneheaded plays with the puck at times.
Yes, he does. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll keep mine simple and short because you guys kind of touched all the points that I had, right? I mean, I believe that the Blues, unless they find themselves at that number 3, so even past a wild card to me, they're okay. We are making the playoffs at this point in time. We're not hanging on to the last week. They're either going to be sellers or they're just not going to do anything at the trade deadline, right? I think that OG brought up, if it makes sense, 100%, like Ibarra, okay, cool. He's not really adding anything to this team. I mean, technically you're selling at that point, but you're not really losing too much. So it's not like we're offloading Bennington and stuff like that, right? So
selling is trading away all your best players for prospects, basically, and buying is the reverse of that, or the inverse of that, however you want to use it. I don't know. So to me, trading Verano for a piece of equal value is essentially just a hockey trade. It's not really either.
Yeah. I see what you're saying in your interpretation of it, but I mean, I'm kind of with you though. Unless we are doing something really bad or really good, I don't see us really doing too much on the trade deadline. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about this. You might trade Verano for another forward, that plays more of a blue collar type game. You know what I mean? When they got De La Rose or whatever back in the day, that wasn't a great trade for him. But I mean, you had no room for Fabry at that point. So my point is maybe you get yourself a useful bottom 6 guy, since Verano's not able to get on the ice first right now. That's all.
Right. Yeah. Well, let's transition here to the second topic that we got to talk about. I think it's one of the more major topics, definitely, that's going on in the world of sports right now, and that is college football. So I'll go through the rankings with you guys real quick. And I actually, before I even get to the rankings, I want to keep in mind too that these are not the final rankings. I've actually been talked to about that or asked that question. Or are these the final rankings for the season? They are not. They will obviously continue after each bowl game and after each week until the national title happens. And at that point, after the national titles, they'll release one more that will be a good starting point for next year. So Mizzou, which is currently 9th, could eventually move up as well. So anyways, number 1 team is Michigan. Number 2 is Washington. 3, Texas. 4, Alabama. 5, Florida State. 6, Georgia. 7 is Ohio State. 8 is Oregon. Us again, Mizzou at 9, and then Penn State at 10. Real quick before we get into any of this stuff here, and we look at the CFP and anything like that, was there really any huge surprises to you guys? OJ, I'll start with you when it came to that. I definitely want to talk about Florida State and whether they should have got in a little bit later on. But were you surprised that Georgia fell so low at 6?
Yeah, I was. I mean, I really think Georgia was the best team in the country at the time, and Bama beating them, vaults them up, sure, but it was close on a neutral site. It was literally 3-point loss on neutral site to the new number one. What did they put Bama at? 2 or 3?
Or 4.
Was it? 4. Okay, whatever. 3-point loss to number 4 when you've been undefeated all year, ranked number 1, haven't lost in like 3 years or whatever.
Yeah, 2.5 years.
It's like, it's basically, I don't know. Maybe it's a little too far to drop them down. I mean, they kind of had to drop them down a little bit to keep them out the playoffs, though. But I don't know.
I agree with you that I thought this was, and again, we'll get into, more around what we thought maybe the ranking should have been when we get to talk about Florida State specifically. But I really didn't think that Georgia is now all of a sudden the 6th team in the nation. They lost to a good Alabama team that lost to one team this season, which was Texas. You know what I mean? So like, I don't understand how the team loses one game in 2.5 years, and all of a sudden they're the 6th in the nation, and now they don't get a chance to, back up their throne. But okay, whatever, that's fine. Anyways, so that means, so the college football playoffs. They would have been better off not playing the.
I was saying it would have been better off not playing the championship game.
Not playing the SEC. Right, exactly. So, anyways, so the two.
For me,
go on.
I just wanted to chime in. I think that the problem is, like, from my perspective, because obviously I haven't been watching a lot of this, at least in the past, and I understand the process as much as you guys, obviously, But for me, this is what I was telling Josh earlier today. For me, it's about the transparency and the consistency of that selection process. To me, seems very unfair. Looking just as an outsider, kind of looking at this, and that's one of the reasons why I am not particularly a fan of this at all. Like, I think it needs some revamping. That's just my general opinion. Sure. Like I said, this is as an outsider looking in, per se, as not understanding the ins and the outs. But for me, it seems very unfair about their decisions.
Yeah, and actually, so you know what we'll do? We'll talk about the college football playoffs, the 2 games here in just a second.
Let's go ahead.
I love that you say that.
Yeah, right. I agree. And let's go ahead and just talk about Florida State and like the process itself, Adam, right? Because, to a guy that doesn't watch a lot of college football, obviously Mizzou's resurgence this year really helped you like kind of watch him more, understand a little bit more and stuff like that. This feels like completely arbitrary, right? It doesn't make any sense. It's up to like people's discretion of what they think is the better team. Like I'm kind of with you. I keep hearing over and over, well, these are the games that people want to see. It shouldn't matter at that point, right? I don't give a shit that TCU lost to Georgia by 7 touchdowns last year. I don't give a shit. TCU earned it. They beat Michigan the week before.
That's what I just it blows my mind. I that's the part where it just I just can't wrap my head around it. That's all.
Yeah.
You have Florida State that is a Power 5 champion that beat LSU this year. That obviously they only beat 3 ranked opponents, right? But it doesn't matter. They went undefeated. Yeah. They won the ACC. And they beat number 14, I think, Louisville in the ACC championship. I don't care if they're on their third string quarterback or not. It does not matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I mean, there's what the resume says, and then there's reality also, though. So that's the other side of things. I personally don't think Florida State ever should have been ranked in the top 4. I don't think they played a tough enough schedule. And a lot of that's because I think Louisville's a major fraud too. Like if you look at the ACC and a lot of these Pac teams and stuff, they don't play anybody. What happens is they play somebody that's ranked high because they're a big name. Turns out that team's shit, but they play them early in the season. They beat them, and then now we're ranked high. Then that team loses a bunch more games and finishes the season completely unranked. USC. But you still get all that credit for beating them earlier in the year,
and the other part of it too, and Josh, I think you made this point to me earlier today when we were talking about this, is that some of these rankings, the preference, at least from my understanding, is the preference is made whenever they're wanting good matchups as well. They're trying to like set the stage, so to speak.
That's not supposed to be how it is, dude.
But I'm saying though, like that. But the fact that that's like is in the back of their head and they're doing that is really fucked up. You know what I mean? Like
agree.
It's fixed,
So,
OJ, we talk about
easily.
we literally talk about all the time. Oh, the NFL is fixed. It's scripted. Blah 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 blah. But I'm like, dude, this is the most scripted shit I've ever seen. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I feel like the most scripted shit would have been keeping Georgia in too.
Well, valid. But I'm just saying though, the overall process of how this is and the perception of how this is, it just seems very
like. Listen, I'm in
scripted.
A complete minority here.
That's all.
I'm in a complete minority here. I believe the number one team by these rankings, the number one team in the nation should be Washington. I mean, they were what? They were ranked number 3, and they went up against a number 5 at a neutral site and beat them. So then you have Michigan, who's number 2, and they beat a number 16 that everybody in the country knows doesn't have an offense. So why are they now the number 1 and Washington is number 2? Like, why, you know what I mean?
Oh my God, the Big Ten West is a dumpster fire, dude. That's like
it's been that way for years.
They almost might as well be fucking G5, this season. Like, that's not a conference. Like, beating them, they shouldn't be ranked probably either. Iowa, they probably shouldn't have ever been in the top 25. Like, but they never played anybody. Yeah, they never played anyone.
Yeah. And see, and here, OJ, this is what I was trying to explain to Adam too when it was talking about this stuff, is that teams now, like during the BCS, like early on when the college football play, like not even playoff, but national title game actually started going on, like in the 30s and 40s, you legitimately had the 2 best teams in the nation because they were pretty much the only undefeated teams because people were playing good teams. They weren't playing these cupcake matchups and shit like that to pad their stats. And so then when they started doing that, recognizing, if we stay undefeated, we have a better chance of winning a national title. So it's not about, taking on the best of the best at that point. So we'll start playing some teams that we shouldn't be playing when we're scheduling our shit. And all of a sudden now, you need the BCS, you need a computer ranking to be like all this stuff. Oh, that doesn't work because now everybody's undefeated. Well, you take a look at this, and I believe that Florida State should be in, and it just goes to prove that now 4 playoff team isn't enough. You know what I mean? So they need them to be able to, like, you need to take on tougher opponents. Like, that's just kind of my thing, right? Alabama is in a tough conference, but they also don't. They did it this year when they scheduled Texas, but historically they don't schedule very tough, like, out of conference games. You know what I mean? So like they have an easier path, and I feel like Ohio State does that. Michigan takes that. Like, they're taking on teams that like Middle Tennessee State, like, they shouldn't be taking on. You know what I mean? If you want to do that, then go to the ACC and like take on Miami. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean they do it because that's the trend in college football, is that you get all your non-con is usually your cupcake games. You put a bunch of them at the beginning of the year to tune your team up. So, Iowa follows that convention, but then also the Big Ten West is a dumpster fire. And I think they, before they played Michigan here, I think they only ever played Penn State is like the only good team they played this year, period, at all. That's their one loss. Also, they got destroyed 31-0 by Penn State, which also Michigan 26-0. Turns out if Iowa plays a good team, they can't score. Like, but they were ranked 16th in the nation for some reason.
But okay, but to my point though is these top teams, regardless, right? Like, we know Iowa is not as good as Ohio State or Michigan, right? So then, like, scheduling somebody else like an Iowa State or whatever, okay, I don't really care about that. But
Iowa State,
like, I applaud. That's what I'm saying. For like Iowa, I don't care if they play them. But like, if, for example, Ohio State shouldn't be scheduling Iowa State. You know what I mean? Like, I commend Florida State for taking on LSU, and I commend Alabama for taking on Texas, right? But it's crazy that the team that didn't get in challenges an SEC team, which, by the way, at the time was ranked higher than they were, beat them. Yeah. And then you have the SEC challenging the Big 12, which has been a joke forever. And all of a sudden they lose to Texas. Here comes Texas again, the resurgence of it. But it's like they've been bad historically for the past like 5 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. No, I don't know. I'm looking at. I don't know, dude. It's one of those things where to me it's impossible. It's an impossible task to rank these teams without screwing somebody, or certainly not finding a ranking everyone's going to agree on. You have 133 teams that you have to rank that all don't play each other. So like, there's going to be some judgment calls, and sometimes it's going to look fucked up. And the committee had a tough choice to make this season, thanks to Alabama beating Georgia.
Yeah.
I mean, they were praying that Louisville would beat Florida State.
It would have made everything much easier. Exactly right.
But It turns out Louisville blows. I mean, they got beat by Kentucky the week before. Like, that was a slim hope, like, so I don't know. So, that's the thing. Oh, you know who Iowa plays in their bowl? In the Citrus Bowl, they're playing number 25 Tennessee. Who do you think is going to win that game? Tennessee's going to blow their. Tennessee's going to win. It may be a low-scoring game, but I don't think Iowa's going to score on Tennessee.
Yeah, because I'm about to say, because Iowa's got really good defense. I mean, their defense is legit.
Yeah,
but they're going to outscore them because it's what I'm saying. It's like that entire team doesn't get points, right? The offense doesn't score points, and the defense doesn't give up points. The zero team, really.
This is an ugly score game for sure, like 15-6 or something.
Yeah, it's something weird. Yeah, exactly.
You'll be like, oh, I can't believe some people watched that.
Well, anyways, I mean, I really do believe that Florida State should have been in it, but if they weren't going to be in it, honestly, so it's weird. After everything that happened, my rankings, I had Washington number 1. I had Michigan number 2. I had Florida State number 3, and then I had Alabama, or not Alabama. I had Georgia my number 4. That's what I had afterwards. I just thought that it would have been really harsh to drop Georgia out of the top 4 after losing one game in the 2 years.
Game, yeah,
exactly.
But then you're also leaving a one-loss Bama out, who only lost to number 7 Texas and beat your number 4, who also is the SEC champion. You see what I'm saying? Exactly. Like there is a real argument for keeping both of them in the top 4, having Bama and Georgia in the top 4. But people would scream about that.
For sure, because then
you're leaving out FSU to put in another SEC team.
Yeah. It's actually interesting too. So I was watching Feinbaum, the analyst for college football on ESPN, and he said that he actually believes that the CFP committee voted one way and changed something, not the top 4, but he believed that the majority of them voted Michigan, Washington, Texas, Alabama, then Georgia, and then Florida State. But they didn't want to embarrass the ACC and put a undefeated ACC champion all the way from 4 to 6. You know what I mean? So I really don't. After Travis got injured, after Jordan Travis got injured, I really think that they the college football player was like, yep, we're done with this team. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I really believe that. Kimberly was like, we're done.
No, I guess you kind of got to do it in. That's why I like the expanded playoffs. That's why I'll always be a proponent of that, because I think it's impossible for the committee to get it right. Even if they're not being nefarious, they're going to make mistakes, because you have to make judgment calls about 2 teams that didn't play anybody on the same schedule sometimes, or each other, and you have to say who's the better team. That's pretty tough to 100%. Do. Sometimes you're going to be wrong. So, it sucks to do it that way. I don't like the whole, FSU was 4th in the nation until their quarterback got hurt. And even though they didn't lose any more games, now we're going to pretend, to me, that's too much playing the games on paper. You do have to try and strike a balance. Now, me personally, I don't think FSU was ever the 4th best team in the country. So I'm okay with them not being in the playoffs. But the committee did. And FSU, they didn't give FSU a chance to prove that their their backup can get it done too. Because, it does happen. 1999 St. Louis Rams, Trent Green goes down the preseason. The season's over before it's begun. Kurt Warner takes over and, leads him to the Super Bowl en route to a Hall of Fame career. Like, you don't know what that kid sitting behind him could do. The rest of the team's pretty fucking good. You got to give him a chance. That's my opinion.
And I mean, it's funny too, because I did get in an argument with some dude that said that expanding to 12 isn't going to be enough, and they're going to want to go to 16, then 32, blah blah blah, because it's always going to be the argument about who the last teams come in. I'm like, yeah, but I understand that 100%. There will always be arguments, but take a look at it. If that 12 team format that they had would have ended now, okay, Florida State's still in, right, and they're still going to be up there. Georgia's in. Ohio State, out of one loss, is in. Oregon, who lost 2 games to Washington, is in. Mizzou, who's lost 2 games to LSU and to Georgia, they're in. Penn State, who lost to Ohio State and lost to Michigan, they're in. Ole Miss, which lost to Alabama and lost to Georgia, they're in. And the only team that would be left out of that would be Oklahoma. But I don't believe that Oklahoma deserved to be up there. There were 2 lost Oklahoma that lost to Kansas, right? That was unranked.
Yeah.
And then what was their other loss? I'm trying to remember. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. And they beat Texas. Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So okay, whatever. So because the 12th team would be the winner of the highest rated other 5 conference, which at this point would be Liberty. So okay, you know what I mean? Like that, it solves so many problems. You know what I mean? Just
Liberty,
going from 4 to 12.
I don't know if you know this or not, but Liberty played the 133rd weakest strength of schedule in the entire country. They literally played the easiest schedule of all Division I college football programs.
Well, and that's why they finished 13-0.
Exactly. So how are they in? That's why people are mad they're in over SMU or Tulane or one of them, because those teams played good teams and probably are much better teams than Liberty, but whatever.
And this is the other thing too, is it what I believe is what's going to happen is it's going to really make this committee focus a lot more on the other 5 teams. You know what I mean? The group 5 teams or whatever you want to call them. Yeah. Because I hate seeing these commercials for now that the playoff matchup is set, where they're like, it started with 138 teams and now it's down to 4. I'm like, that's bullshit. You never started with 138 teams, because all these other teams at the other 5, they're never going to have a chance at getting to the CFP. So stop saying it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I agree with you 100%. I think that when you're trying to decide your playoff field, there's obviously a lot of considerations. If you're just looking at it from a game perspective, you want it to strike a balance between making sure enough teams get in to where you can actually get the real champion, like the actual best team in the field, so they have a chance to prove it on the field, right?
Right.
And then also not devaluing the regular season to where the playoffs are so large and so many teams get in that it almost doesn't matter how your regular season goes, just how you do in the playoffs,
Exactly. Then
I think,
to me, it's taken to meaning like the fact that you have to have a 500 season to be eligible for a bowl game. That's ridiculous to me. But they make money a lot on these bowl games. So
yeah, but now players opt out. Who even wants to watch it? Like, I didn't even watch the Wake Forest Mizzou bowl game last year because I would have if a bunch of players didn't opt out. But when the players don't give a shit about it, why should I?
Right.
You know
exactly.
What I'm saying? That's bad. So they need to do something to make those bowls mean something again, I think, too.
Definitely.
I 100% agree. Speaking of that, let's actually go ahead and dive into the bowl games here. And to take a look at some of them, or not the bowl games, but I guess at least the college football playoff games. So the first one, again, will be number 1 Michigan taking on number 4 Alabama. So, again, I got some stats here, and then we'll go through a prediction here. So up to this week, Michigan is the 68th team in the nation offensively for yards per game. They are 75th in passing per game offensively, 60th in rush per game, but they are 14th in points per game. On the defensive side, though, this is where Michigan actually has a huge advantage, I feel, in Alabama and really to the other contenders. They are second in yards allowed per game, second in passing yards allowed per game, 6th in rushing yards allowed per game, and first in the nation in points allowed per game. Michigan, when you flip that over, is 54th in yards per game offensively, 61st in the pass, 49th in the rush, and 19th in points in the country. On the defensive side, they are 18th in the yards allowed, 23rd in pass defense, 33rd, in rush defense, and 17th in points allowed per game. So to me, when we look at this, it's really going to come down to Michigan's defense holding up to Alabama's offense, because Michigan, statistically at least, is not that good of a offensive team. Oh, and by the way, they are 14th in the nation, as I said, in points per game. That's including defensive scores added on to points total. If you take that out, they are at 67th. Just saying.
Yeah.
So to me, like, I think that, it's going to come down again to that offensive line for Alabama trying to control the defensive front of Michigan. But I have Michigan winning this one by 10. I really do believe that the CFP is trying to set them up for success for whatever reason. So I got Michigan by 10.
And I'm going with. Oh, go ahead.
No, yeah, you do it, man.
I was going to say, looking at this, like you were mentioning, Bama's, their offense, which in my opinion is going to win this game, I think, for them. But obviously two teams that I really couldn't care less for. But I think just had to put that out there. Anyway, unfortunately, I do think Bama's going to win this one by probably a touchdown. That's what I think.
Fair enough. What do you got, OJ?
Well, personally, I think Michigan hasn't played anybody either. Let me run down their schedule real quick. So they got East Carolina, I believe, this year. Yeah, that was their first match. So East Carolina, UNLV, Bowling Green, Rutgers, Nebraska, Minnesota, Indiana, Michigan State. Not a single halfway decent team. Like, seriously, those are like G5 tier teams this year, pretty much. Like, those are all bad teams. then Purdue. Then finally they played Penn State. They win by a score of 24-15. Then they escape, luckily, against Maryland, 31-24. And then they beat Ohio State. So, like, they played Penn State, Ohio State. Those are the good teams they played, right? You could also question Penn State and Ohio State's rankings, considering that they've also mostly played shit competition outside of each other. But anyway, the point, and then they rolled Iowa, who I think is terrible too. I really don't think Michigan's played tough competition enough this year, and Alabama's come out of the gauntlet of the SEC. I think Alabama's going to win running away because, the other thing is I think we have to also mention how Michigan is a bunch of cheaters. First of all,
yes,
if you leave a team out of your top four, why wasn't it them?
Yeah, they should be disqualified. Exactly right.
Exactly. They
for games been. This year. Put FSU in over them. Fuck it. But no, Michigan, you need to keep. Yeah. So anyway, the thing is, Nick Saban, he sees you coming, Jim Harbaugh. You ain't stealing his signs. And he's got a team disciplined enough where they're going to mix some shit up. They're going to fuck him up. Michigan's going to lose in a landslide. I don't know, 31-7.
Whoa.
24 points. All right.
Damn. All right.
I'm going to keep track of those like I did last week.
How are they going to do without Saban's signs? Let's see it.
I agree with you. I'm actually trying to look back real quick. So, real quick. So, OJ, what we were keeping track of I'm just going to go through the championship weekend, what we had. So, in the Big Ten championship, I had Michigan by 10. You had Michigan by 3. Michigan obviously won by 26. So, we were both way off. The Big 12 championship, I had Texas by 3. You had Texas by 17. They won by 18. So you were much closer than I was.
Yeah, that was the only one I picked well.
ACC championship, you had Florida State by 14. I had them by 3. They won by 10.
I didn't get that one. Okay.
Yeah, we both in the SEC game had Georgia by 14. We lost that as Alabama won by 3.
Ooh, yeah.
And then I had Oregon by 10. You had Oregon by 17, and Washington won by 3. So,
Yeah.
anyways,
Yeah, I had a
forgot
bad. Washington impressed me. I didn't think that their line was going to be able to hang with Oregon's line ultimately, but no, I mean, credit to them. They really do have a good offensive and defensive line. Like, those dudes are legit. They could, so respect to Washington.
Speaking of Washington, that is the second game that we have here on the college playoff. So Washington versus Texas. Going through their stats real quick. Washington's offense is 11th in yards per game, first in passing in the nation. They are 100th though in the rush, but they are 11 points per game. Defensively, they are 93rd in yards allowed per game, 122nd in pass defense, 41st in the rush, and 50th in points allowed, which is kind of significant, right, for a team that's ranked second in the nation. However, Texas is 9th in yards per game offensively, 19th in the passing, 24th in rushing, 16th in total points scored season long. Defensively, they're 23rd in yards against, 95th in the pass, 4th in the rush. So huge. Their secondary apparently is trash, and obviously have a good defensive front. They are 13th in points allowed per game. So for me, this is really going to come down to, can Washington's passing game control the Texas defense, and will they be able to outpace their offense on the defensive side? If that makes sense. Like if Washington has issues throwing the ball, the game's over, in my opinion. So I have Texas here by 3. I think it's going to be a close game, but I think Texas comes out on top.
I've got Texas by probably a touchdown. I think that they're going to be the clear winners here.
I don't know. I really did. Like, I mean, I know Texas's defensive front. Well, I mean, I was very impressed by Washington's offensive line performance against Oregon. I really was. I think they're going to stand up pretty well to this Texas. But Texas is a good, well-rounded team this year, too. So I think it's going to be a close match for sure. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to keep it less than a touchdown. I'll say, buddy. Man, it's a tough pick, I got to say.
It is. I went back and forth this one a lot.
I think I'll just go. Where are they playing at? Sorry.
I'm trying to remember where they're playing at. Give me 1 second. I can look that up.
Yeah.
Here we go. It is. Oh, that's not anything. I don't even know which bowl they're actually playing in.
Let me double check that quick. So that's what I'm going to factor that into my decision.
Oh, here it is. I got it now, I think. Okay.
Sugar Bowl.
The Sugar Bowl, which is going to be New Orleans. Yep.
I mean, who do you think? Which fan base do you think is going to get out there the most? Probably the Longhorns fans.
Yeah, I mean, even if it was in Washington, you're probably going to see a lot of Texas fans. So.
Yeah, dude, that's ooh. I really want to say Washington by 6. Then I'll say Washington by 6.
Perfect. Well, we'll see obviously how that plays out. Obviously we got a while before these games happen because they'll be happening on the 1st. But it's going to be interesting. I'm very, very interested to see what's going on, and maybe we'll keep an eye on when the Bulls officially get announced, for everybody, and then we'll just kind of take some stock of those games or something. But all right, so let's get back here to some hometown football here. So Mizzou is going up against Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl, which is a very big matchup for Mizzou. The biggest thing, though, comes down to who's skipping this bowl, right? Because I'm starting to take a look at the names that Ohio State might be without, and I'm getting a little worried that this is going to be lopsided in favor of us. McCord, their quarterback, is already in the transfer portal. He's gone. Fleming, I think is their number 3. He's also in the portal, so he can't play. Travion Henderson, which is their starting running back, he's expected to miss. Marvin Harrison Jr., their number one playmaker and, their Heisman candidate, is widely expected to miss, right, according to the people at Ohio State. That is fan base, not staff. So, people around campus and stuff like that. OJ, what's your opinion on all these people, skipping the bowl? As you said earlier, it, makes you not want to watch it compared to obviously when the players are in it. But is this something that, they should have more pride in?
Yeah, I mean, so the problem is this kind of has that's the other issue with this bowl system is it kind of has sort of a built-in nature of keeping the little guy out, because when you get a situation like this is a huge opportunity for Mizzou to build respect for their program, which can feed upon itself to help them grow more and all that shit. To Ohio State, this is a letdown because they want to be in the playoffs. So
right
now their players opt out. So even if Mizzou smokes them, it's not, you don't get nearly as much credit for it. So it's how is a smaller school ever supposed to climb into the ranks of the big boys when anytime we come to play them, they all just don't show up because it's not worth their time. You know what I mean?
Right.
How are you supposed to prove you're on par with them? So that's kind of one of the issues I was thinking about with it. I don't know, because the transfer portal's not open. These guys have declared for the transfer portal, but I don't know if that necessarily means they won't play. They probably won't. No. But I am reading a quote from. Sorry, go ahead.
They have to file the paperwork with the organization, and it gets submitted to the NCAA. So once that happens, the school itself is not they are not even on their 53-man roster kind of thing. Because you have to, they lose a scholarship through that school, and then it's whoever else is going to give them a scholarship in the portal at that point.
Yeah.
So once they declare and submit, which that McCord and Fleming already have, they will not be eligible to play.
Gotcha.
At least from my understanding of it. Yeah.
Okay. No, fair enough. So yeah, if they're not eligible, then yeah, they're not going to play. Of course, the good news is Ohio State does have a lot of, they'll have a lot of good players filling in for these guys. That's for sure, at least.
Sure.
So now I think the quarterback, I heard that he declared for the transfer portal because the coach wouldn't commit to him as their starter next year. So, you could say, oh man, we're not going to face them with their starting quarterback, but they weren't so sure they wanted him to start for him anyway. So, it's not as much of a letdown in my opinion, but
no, but it's still, the thing is, and these are all the just offensive pieces. There's a few defenders that are expected to miss as well.
No, don't get me wrong. Overall, it sucks. But I'm saying the quarterback, at least, it's not as bad as it could be.
Yeah, well, that is true too. Well, let's just go ahead and jump here to the predictions. I have Mizzou winning this game by 13. I think that Mizzou takes the hold of this and then pulls away late. What do you two think about the score there for this game?
I'm thinking myself, Mizzou, it's going to be a closer game than that, in my opinion. I think we're going to win probably by a field goal.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So this definitely be a letdown game for Ohio State. They're going to have all their transfers. It should be a well-attended game by both sides, I think.
Yeah, but Mizzou's going in pretty healthy too. So.
Yeah. I honestly think. I also think, I think the Big Ten was a pretty shitty conference this season with 3 teams that are any good, and we don't know how good any of them really are. So we'll have to see what happens. But I'm going to give Mizzou 2 scores on this one. Let's call it. They'll win by 14 points. 14, 2 touchdowns.
2 full ones. All right. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see what ends up happening, obviously, and if any more players, decide that they're not going to play in this game by declaring or by going to the portal.
I honestly think Ohio State does not see Mizzou coming, dude. I think they really think they're too good to be playing us. Yeah, they think that Ohio State shouldn't have to step on the field with us. So I think it's going to be to their detriment.
Agreed. Well, let's get to the last topic I have here for the night and talk a little Cardinals baseball. There's not obviously too much to talk about. We haven't made any signings and stuff like that, but a lot of trade rumor right now going around, especially around Bro Neal. So even a statement by Mo, he stated that it would be a quote unquote a surprise if a trade for O'Neal didn't come through. So I think it's going to be interesting, but I think obviously it looks like he is on the trading block. This is an active, like we're receiving offers, putting out offers. But the question I have for you guys, and I'll start with you, Adam, what value do you think he even has at this point?
Well, he doesn't have a lot of value, and obviously, and I think it was also Mo made the point that we're not going to be chasing big name pitchers, and like Dylan Cease and Glasnow and Burns and all those guys. We aren't going to chase after them, but we do have to bolster the bullpen. So I think that we can probably draw something from that, and I've seen some rumors that we might be, in talks to the Royals, and there may be some rumblings there. I think that we're not going to get a whole hell of a lot for him because he just, right now, in this market, I don't think he brings a lot of value, unfortunately. They're going to be looking at, because I'm looking at here, at his overall stats, and they're just not all that impressive, and he's had some injuries as well. He's had shoulder and hamstring injuries. He only played 96 games in 22, obviously more injury issues again last year. He only played 72 games, 231 with a 94 OPS. So, a guy who's not performing at his best and is injury prone is not going to draw you a whole hell of a lot. So, but I think that we do need to focus though on bolstering that bullpen.
Yeah, and you make up some good points, especially with the injuries and stuff like that. I mean, obviously we know he's got speed, he won a Gold Glove, but it's the durability aspect of things, and that does definitely bring down some value, right? So I think that's a very good point. OJ, what's your thoughts here? I mean, what do you think that Bro Neal could potentially get for the Cardinals?
Well, I mean, I honestly think you could have him be like the main piece of a reliever trade, something like that. Because, I mean, just look at Cody Bellinger, right? This past offseason is a very similar scenario to me, because just a couple years ago in 2021, Tyler O'Neill was worth 5.5 WAR. He had an MVP caliber season. Now, he's had 2 unhealthy years in a row where he missed a lot of time, and his numbers don't look good during those seasons. But if you get him and you can get him right, you can have an absolute stud on your hands, and probably be pretty easy to find a team that's willing to take a flyer on that has a need in the outfield and maybe has depth elsewhere, like in the bullpen or on their pitching staff somewhere. So I do think he has value. I think he's got real value, because I mean, he really is like a 5-tools player when he's right. He's fast as hell. He's good with his glove. He's not the most natural defender, but he still has enough speed to get where he needs to go, and he's sure-handed. The dude's a hell of a ball player when he's right. So that will attract somebody probably to deal with us, I think, because there are teams out there that do not have outfielders that can hit at all, that are desperate. So
for sure. Yeah, I think the biggest question is if O'Neal is also on the block, right, and you're going to use him as the main piece, like who else is potentially on the trading block? I think that there has been lots of talks about Alec Burleson and a lot of talk about Carlson as well. But I really believe if you're going to move O'Neal, I think you keep Carlson just for depth purposes. But, maybe Carlson and then you keep O'Neal, right? Whatever that looks like. But I think that Alec Burleson could just go. That's fine with me. And then obviously it comes to the question about the infield. What about Donovan or Nolan Gorman or Tommy Edman as well? Because we know Mason Wynn's going to probably be here next year, right? So I think that is a serious question as well. And, I'll just kind of ask you guys, obviously, outside of that box, can you guys see anybody else on the trading block? Adam, I'll start with you on that.
I mean, honestly, just looking at this right now, I think you've hit all the ones that I think
Mhm.
are the most obvious for sure. We may have to give up a little bit more than we hope for, but we really need to focus on, obviously our starting rotation, which in my opinion is still not where it needs to be, but it looks like, I guess we're settling. And then obviously the bullpen. So I think that we could probably structure some deals where we might be able to help at least give a little bit of that support in the reliever section if we do have to start pulling some of our starting guys out, especially when you're talking about Lance Lynn. He's an older guy. He's not going to be able to go you know and make quality starts on a regular, I don't believe. So you're going to have to get
Right.
some good guys behind him. So we may end up having a few guys that we're having to put together, maybe some structured deals to be able to find some good some good relievers for sure. And I know that there's been talks about, maybe Shane Bieber as well. There's been talks, as far as eyeing him up from the Guardians. It'll be interesting if we could actually land somebody like him or not. But for me, I think you've hit them all.
Yeah, and again, I think that you definitely bring up some good points, especially around Bieber. Again, he always seems to be on the trade conversation with the Cardinals. I mean, the
Yeah,
Cardinals are high on them, but it's what can we give up for him,
that's the
So
thing
it's going to
is,
be interesting.
yeah, that's definitely it for me. Is what's it going to take to make it happen, and how serious the other part too. And I hate to beat a dead horse, but at the same time is how much does Mo really want to
Right.
excel our team from a potential division winner to an actual playoff, go deep into the playoffs type of team as well, that we actually have a real shot at it, and right now I continue to see the fact that they're not reinvesting in the team where they need to be right now.
Yeah,
Not
not
to that
committed
level,
towards it.
not to that caliber.
Yeah.
No. So I am, unfortunately, I hate to be a pessimist here, but I just don't see us making some big moves here to make it happen. But we'll see. I don't think we're going to get enough for O'Neill that is going to make up for it.
Well, OJ, do you have anybody else that you see as a potential trading target for the Cardinals besides the ones we've talked about?
Well, yeah, I mean, Shane Bieber. Well, Shane Bieber is intriguing to me, but I mean, Dylan Cease, Tyler Glass, now Shane Bieber. Those are the ones I've heard mentioned mostly. Uh, Not sure about relievers side of things. I always question, acquiring relievers because they're so, volatile from year to year. But I don't know. I'm looking at Shane Bieber's numbers right now, and some people are really not thrilled with him, but his numbers last year were good. I don't
Oh,
know what
great. Yeah.
the problem with them is, honestly. Is it looks like his exit velocity against took a tick up. I think it's probably like his fastball slowing down or something. But anyway, he's young enough. He's only gonna be like 28. I think he's kind of at a low value right now. He could be an interesting target, and I do think like a Tyler O'Neill, Steven Matz kind of thing might be in there somewhere. I don't know if they would want
Mhm.
Steven Matz in that trade, but like, yeah, he's considered damaged goods a little bit, I think. So it might be a good buy low opportunity on him. I kind of like that suggestion.
Yeah, as long as you're not getting up, Gracefo or anything like that, I'm all
Yeah,
in.
yeah.
I think
If it's
that'll
a
be
good value,
good.
yeah.
Exactly. All right, guys. Well, let's go ahead and head to our sign off here. Adam, would you do me the favor of telling the good listeners how they could communicate with us and interact with the show?
Our lovely listeners can always check us out on Facebook. Check us out at facebook.com/the hometown losers. Once again, that's spelled LOUSERS. Or just search in the Facebook search bar, type in the hometown losers. We are on there. We post weekly, sometimes a couple times a week. We'd love to, have you give us a like, give us a share, and we'd love to hear from our listeners. As always, post up there some feedback or any questions you have for us. And also, if you're not a fan of the Facebook, the Zuckerberg media platform, I don't blame you. Then go check out Elon's massive media empire over at x.com and look for us. We're called the Hometown Losers over there too.
Roddy, appreciate that, Adam. OJ, what do you have for us for the game of the week?
Saturday night, 7 p.m. Blues Blackhawks at the United Center. Let's spank them on their home ice.
There you go.
Yeah. Fuck Chicago.
Fuck Chicago.
That's the motto until next week, baby.
I was going to say
Chicago.
It's national.
That should just be the tagline for the show.
Yeah, pretty much.
Fuck Chicago. Fuck Chicago. And kick, I was going to say in national, kick Blackhawks fans' ass day too. So there you go.
Punch Red Wing fan in the face day. Yeah.
Fuck yeah. So punch a Blackhawks.
We do get the Red Wings after that too. The game after that.
I think it's just an alternating.
So I was going to say we're going to be seeing some old colleagues.
No. Yeah, so it's going to be Red Wings, and then it's going to be Blackhawks, and then Bruins, and then it's just going to cycle back. There you go. Gotta have the Bruins.
It's going to be a bloodbath.
Oh yeah. No, I wasn't joking. They actually have the Red Wings after the Blackhawks, but just so you know.
Oh. Oh, man, that's funny. Okay. Well, we'll have to alternate that, as you said. Yeah. There you go.
Well, at least we have some ideas going forward.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate your time. We appreciate the listeners. If you want to hear anything from us, specific content, please let us know again on the socials that Adam mentioned. And we will catch you here next week on the Hometown Losers podcast. Have a great night, everybody.
Hey guys, this is Adam. Just want to say thanks for listening to the Hometown Losers podcast. We'll see you next week as we continue our discussion of St. Louis sports.